All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Ed Cutrell. I'm here at Microsoft Research, and it's my pleasure to introduce Greg Vanderheiden, professor at the iSchool at University of Maryland, College Park, and he's also the director of the Trace Center. And Dr. Vanderheiden has been doing accessibility for almost 50 years, I think. So he's like one of the great granddaddies of our field. And it's a real pleasure. He's worked with Microsoft since basically the very beginning of Microsoft doing accessibility work. So he's out here in the area and wanted to come and give us some update on some stuff he's been thinking about lately. And hopefully it will be a nice interactive bit. And it's going to be my pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much. I'm going to do a presentation kind of in three parts. The first one is I want to talk about an emerging problem of our own making. It's something that we've sort of always knew was there, but we just really didn't understand the depth or complexity of it. And then second, I'm going to be showing some work that we've been doing to try to address this, and those two will get done together because it was in working on the second one that we realized how deep a hole we actually were trying to fill. And then I'm going to end by talking about next generation. So what is our interface going to look like in 20 years? And how are we going to be addressing accessibility? And I'm going to posit that we not only can't approach accessibility the way we have been at that time, but that there are some new technologies, things that we're all working on, and that industry in particular is working on, that may give us tools to actually approach it in a completely different way, kind of actually upside down from what we're doing today in looking at accessibility. So we have an emerging crisis. It's one that we have been making. While technology is enabling independence and employment and participation for some people, it's actually creating barriers for others. People used to be able to get an education, be employed, live independently without having to use technology, but not anymore. If you want to tell your kids, I want you to go to school, but I just don't believe in this technology stuff, so I don't want you on the web and using technology and email and computers and stuff like this. They would look at you like you were on drugs or something and say, but Mom, Dad, that's how they give out homework. That's where the homework is. I know you used to go to libraries to look up information, but all my classmates are going to have the entire internet as a resource for their assignments, and what am I going to do? Getting jobs. Think of trying to get a job. Even jobs that don't require computer use require computer use. And healthcare. I mean, we go and the doctor tells you, well, the reports are online, the information. So we are finding now that if you actually try to go and do any of these things and completely eschew technology, you can't do it. But we are creating a society, therefore, that requires the ability to understand and use technology, but we're not actually designing technologies that can be understood and used by all. We made progress. There's special interfaces. We put inclusive design features into our operating systems and into our products. But actually, these are really better, and they're really tuned to people who have more technical ability. We say that everything is accessible to people, to blind people, if we can just make it work with their screen readers. But screen readers are great for bright, blind people. But there's a lot of people who are blind who can't use screen readers. And if you say, oh, well, then they can't use, oh, my goodness. What can't they do now? All of the stuff is off the table. And we don't notice it so much because all of the people we know who have disabilities tend to be at the upper end of this. I have something that I call TQ. It's a technology quotient. It's not the same as IQ, because I know people that are blazingly smarter than I am who can't use their technologies, but I can. So does that make me smarter than them? Not by a long shot. But the ability to use technology, we need to recognize as its own special ability. And if you have somebody who has really, really low technology quotient, it's like somebody who's got really, really low stature. You can't tell them that, oh, we designed it to be on a high shelf, but you should just reach harder and you'll be able to reach it. They just, don't have the ability to use the technologies. We're designing them at too high a level. So now, those of us in the room that have high IQ, high TQ, we have your entire organization filled with people who have high IQ and high TQ designing things, and it's just really hard for them to design. If we have trouble using technologies, and how many here have not had trouble using their technologies, what about the half below the median? How about the bottom 20%? How about the bottom 10%? If you design something that 90% of the people can do, you say, wow, our inclusive design, we've reached 90% of the population, you can feel pretty good, except that's 1 out of 10 people can't use it. And that is a lot of people. And that is a real problem. And what we're finding is we're seeing many more people having many more problems than we ever expected. Even when we try to add all of these new features in, we say, well, we'll make it more flexible, we'll add new options. Every time we add an option, what do we add? Complexity. So as we try to make it more flexible, and particularly when we're dealing with people with cognitive disabilities, if you have something that, say, cognitive goes from here to here, the complexity, you can knock off about 20% of the complexity on any design and not lose any information or any functionality. It's just we design them too complicated. But as you keep going down, you start having to give up some information or some features. You can't make something that's really, really, really simple and not lose information. You can't teach physics in a very, very, very simple way and not lose something from what you want to teach to physics majors. Okay? So we now have lots of levels. So you're going to have to design for the different kinds of levels. So how do we do that? Well, we have features that can make things that are too small to read larger. These are all built right into Windows. We have things that make it so you can change the language so that if you're trying to learn the operating system, we have people coming from other countries, and it's something we didn't expect. Many of them all come up and they hit community college, and all they've been using is mobile technologies. Okay? Windows looks nothing like mobile technologies. Okay? Yet Windows is what they need to be able to master if they're going to go out into the job market, saying that they know how to use the 3 apps that I always use on my mobile device. And you'll also find that they also don't really know how to use all of the aspects of their mobile device. Ask them to share documents between 2 programs, and they just look at you like, why would I want to do that? You can do that? Kind of things. Now, we all know how to do it, but if you think about it, you have to think about it. And that means that's a measure right there. We can make things so that they have higher contrast, okay? But we can even take, Word, which has got like 11 menus of all the different icons and stuff, and we can make it so that it has a simple menu, right? But getting there, to use those features, you first of all need to be aware of them. Okay, and most people don't know that you can do all of those things. The thing we always hear when we start doing this and showing morphic and stuff like this is, I didn't know Windows could do that. I didn't know that the computer could do that. The next thing is you need to know how to do it. And often it's so complicated that even when you show them how to do it, and they go, oh, that's fantastic. You come back the next day and they're not doing it. And why not? It's just they don't remember how to do it. They can't find it. Sometimes we can't find how we did it last time ourselves when we did it. And sometimes you actually have to have the feature turned on before you can use the computer to go turn the feature on. And you'd say, oh, yeah, but we have some little hotkeys. How many people do you know who have trouble with technology who are really good at remembering lots of key combinations? And of all of the settings you have, you've got key combinations for just a few of them. And the rest of them, they're out. So we've been working on something to try to explore this problem called morphic. And the goal of morphic is to try to figure out how to make things simpler for people to use who need to use special adaptive technologies. And I need to get out of this mode so that it'll share my screen. There you go. So first of all, what morphic does, and this is where morphic started with, was this idea of auto-personalization, the ability to store in the cloud what you need. And then when you sit down to a computer, it can have it automatically applied. So we do this by having not a profile of the user, but their preferences, how they would like things to be set up, stored in the cloud. And it's stored under a big UUID, just a big number like a Swiss bank account. And then when you want to invoke it, you can do it in several ways. One of them that I'll be using here is you can just have a little USB that's got the number on it, and you give it to morphic, and it goes up, looks it up, comes down, and applies it. At the community college, we actually tie it to their sign-in. So when they sign in, they don't have to have any keys. When they sign in, it automatically does it. Or at the library, you can associate it with the library card. So when they just log in, it automatically applies. So now this is Alice. Now Alice needs an on-screen keyboard. So she just plugs in a USB or logs in. And it'll go up, bring down, and launch the on-screen keyboard. And it's just the one that she wants, set up with just the features she wants in the way she wants it. And then when she's done, she goes away and it disappears. Now Olivia, she needs to have a screen reader. And now this is really good because until the screen reader is there, she can't use it. And she uses NVDA. And so she comes in, she can be able to just key in, and it'll automatically launch. And so it'll launch this right screen reader at the right speed using the...
Most commands for controlling NVDA require you to hold down the NVDA key while on desktop.
Okay. So, and in the language. So it's the right speed, the right language, the right settings, all of the verbosity, etc. And then when she's done, it automatically goes away. And the ability to have it automatically go away is also key. We had one woman who was coming in for a study. And when we bring somebody in for a study around technology, you always check to see what their technical background is. So we asked her, do you use a computer? And she said, well, I used to. We said, okay, so what did you use it for? She says, well, I used it for email, and then I used the Skype, and I would use that to talk to the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, and the nieces and nephews, and that was really fun. And then we, a bunch of us, my friends and I, we got together and we did this Facebook thing. Wow, it's pretty nice. But you said you used to use it. She said, yeah. She said, one day I was sitting there and I heard the kids in the other room and they were going, the computer's all messed up for Grandma again. And I figured, you know, I've had my time. This is their time. So I stopped using the computer. And I like to want to die. I just sat there. And at the time, this was a number of years ago, there was not much that I could do about it. But the ability to have it so that it could set up. She is not able to set up the computer so she could use it. And she had no idea how to unset it up when she was done. But with morphic, setting it up instantly, and then when she walks away, instantly it kicks back. So that's a key part. Another thing that we built into morphic, and this is a problem, is that ordinarily having it just set up the AT there is fine if the AT is there to set up. The problem is if you go to the library, often you'll find that the only computer that has the AT that you need is the one up on the 4th floor in the resource room that is open in the daytime and may not be open at night. And so you only can use one computer some of the time, and you can't use it for the class. You can't use it for the the special lab in the evening for teaching this or that or the other thing. So with Morphic, we have something called installation on demand, which means that if you sit down to a computer and it sees that you need AT and it's not there, it will automatically get the AT. It checks licenses to make sure that either Morphic or the site or you have a license to it. It downloads it and launches it and configures it exactly the way you need to have it. And then when you leave, it takes it all back away. So for the first time, when you go to the library, you can sit with your friends. You can go to that special lab in the evening that's about this topic. When you go to your community college, any classroom, any computer, any lab, you can sit down to any computer and you'll be able to have the AT you need show up, be configured, set up for you, and leave. And when you go, it then just disappears again. We've even had situations where people sat down at a computer and it was the right screen reader, because it's usually the wrong screen reader when you get there, or it's set to the wrong speed, in which case you can't use it because you can't understand it to slow it down, things like this. So all of this happens. So this is all part of the auto-personalization that we did. And these are all things that Morphic can do. So we went out and we started working with American Job Centers, and we worked with community colleges and libraries, and we learned something. We learned a whole bunch of things. But one of the things that we found was that none of these places have time to work with their patrons to set up anything like profiles and needs and things like this. The AJCs are hanging on by their fingernails. The librarians are running around, and they also don't know what these features are. So how are they going to help somebody figure out what features they should be setting up when they don't know what they are, and there's no chance? A lot of these places also have people turning over all the time, especially job centers and things like this. So how are we going to get there? So that was one problem. The other thing we discovered is there were a lot of people that didn't really need AT. You have so much stuff built into Windows that if they only could get at it, that would be wonderful. So, but getting at it is kind of a trick. So we created something called a quick strip. And let me bring up the one that we start with. That was sort of the advanced one. And so the quick strip allows us to be able to make it easier for people to be able to find and discover the settings and things that they need. And to, again, remember we talked about awareness so if we look at a quick strip, so here we have one. Just a second, it's adjusting to your monitor. And so here we have the ability, for example, to change languages. So now you have the ability to change languages, but it's pretty complicated. You have to go in and find it. So on here, let's say Chinese. So if I just click on Chinese, within a couple seconds, you'll see it comes back, and now the menus are in Chinese. Okay? Not having to reboot the computer, but all of the parts that you're looking for now are in Chinese, all of the complicated menus. So again, people who came out of mobile are now trying to figure out how Windows, and we get lost on these menus sometimes. So imagine somebody who's just coming out of mobile, and they're trying to figure out all this complication in another language. So in this case, they can switch it back, so at least when they're trying to figure it out, they can figure out the complexities in their own language. We also have translate tools, and so we have all of the different ones, including your Microsoft Translate app that does text-speech. Did you know that you have an app that will actually point at street signs and it'll see? Look at this. Good for tutorials here. Screen zoom. You have this great capability to make things larger on the screen, and it's nice. It's much better than a magnifier, but trying to find it and understand it is hard. So this one, again, what does it do? It just uses the standard tools You can either make it larger, or if you want to have more real estate, you can actually make it so that everything's smaller and you got a bigger desktop if you decide that's what you want. Now, one of the things that we found in the community college is people who were having trouble with the coders. They kept saying, well, we need to be able to take a picture of the screen, and we can't figure out how to do screen snapshots and things like this. And when they do, it takes a picture of the whole screen. So they send it to the professor, and they're trying to tell them where in the code. So what they really want to do is just take out the part of the code they're having trouble with. And so he said, oh, it's really easy. All you need to know is you click over here. Well, let me put this back into English for you so that it's a little easier for you. But you have a really nice little screen snipping tool. If anybody is aware of it and they know the secret code for being able to get to it. And so it's nice because you have it right there in here. So if you know to click on the notifications, and then you know to click on the expand, and then you know to click down here, voila, you suddenly get a really nice little snipping tool. But again, just making it so that it's easier, you just click screen snip and there you've got it. And so then you can go, and I guess you can even make a gerrymandered screen split and capture it and post it to where you'd like to do it. And again, another one we found is in Word. So they actually had people who were trying to learn English. And they were using Microsoft Word. And what she wanted them to do was to go through and to turn on tracking and mark it up and highlight the parts where they needed to be fixed, and then to turn that in for their homework. And after several classes where she would go around trying to get each one to find out which controls were where on which of the different strips, they finally gave up. She passed out paper, yellow magic highlighters, and a red pen, and just told them to mark it up on paper and then go over and put it on the scanner, and then to turn their homework in that way, because they were not able to figure out how to get all of the people to figure out. She was wasting all of her time trying to teach them how to find things in Windows. Well, so one of the things that they asked for was, one is to make it so we have MS Word Simplify. Now, you can make this simple. It's real easy. You just right-click over here, and you click Customize Ribbon. And then you come over here, and you, Customize Ribbon. And then you click on, you get the commands up. And then, of course, you sort of learn by it telling you that you didn't create a group, that you have to create a special group. And then you have to rename the group so you know what it is. And then you come over here and you find all the items you want to put from this little short list here to put onto your menu to try and simplify it. But the problem you have is you've got next, 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 and next. And they're all different nexts. So even if you find the controls you want on your thing, you'll usually find that there's several of them here, and they all do different things. So you have to figure out which they are. And it's not just next, it's delete, it's more, here's more colors. Look at how many different more colors there are, and things like this. So it's there, but it's not something. And if it's somebody who can't handle the ribbons, they certainly can't handle that. But it's great. You have it in there. The capability is there. Now all we have to do is to figure out how do we make it that can be exposed to somebody in a way that they can actually use it. So one of the things that we put on here is Simplify. And this one, and again, all Morphic does is remember and change settings. So it did. It just changed it, and it gave you a very, very simple ribbon. So you can see on the ribbon here, on there. Now, you also have a simplification, but mostly what you do is you take away all the words, and that doesn't actually make things simpler. The icons are, everybody thinks that icons, well, it looks visually simpler to get rid of all those words and just have the icons, but take away all the words and have even people from your own Word team tell you what all the icons mean, and pretty soon they'll have to start, looking around, because it's not that easy to remember, and for people who don't know in advance. So we have the words and we've got the icons, and they're all nice and large, makes it easy to work with. We also found that for some people, they needed to be able to access different things off of different menus. So we have an essentials, and with this one, you have one ribbon that has all of the most important things off of all of the ribbons, okay? So here's all the file and print, here's all the formatting and paragraph formatting, here's all the inserts that you need to do. We even forgot to put equations on here, and they came back and said, oh, we need to have insert equations. So we said, oh, okay. So people are having trouble. And here's all the edit tracking and stuff like this, so without having to go back and forth. Also, one of the problems you have is that we keep updating things. And what happens when we update them? We decide to rearrange them. And we change the icons. And we do other kinds of things. And people who finally, remember, we have people that are hanging on by their fingernails. And then what we do is we move the ledge that they're hanging onto. And of course, they fall. So by doing this, as you can still change your other menus, this one stays the same because this one is defined as it is. Okay. So these are the kinds of things that we've done around Word. High-low contrast. You had high contrast, but you didn't have low contrast. So we added some more themes to Windows, and then we exposed the expanded set of themes. People who have trouble reading often will ask for low contrast instead of high contrast. So we added those kind of things. But one of the things that we did here, and we've seen this as part of our layering, and we'll hear that again later, is that we expose some of them, but if people want more, it says help and more options. We open up and we tell you that here are all the places that you can go into the control panels, and we'll drop you right into the control panel where you need to be. Okay? So we do that. So here's one for color vision. People don't even know that this is around, and so there's a large number of individuals who have, 1 in 7 people who are male, and a smaller percentage of females have color vision problems, and it's really fine most of the time except when people send you color-coded information. And so this lets you change the way the colors are presented, as you can see here, to make them so that you end up with contrasting colors for different. But there's more than just these available, so we make it so that you can click here, and again, go back, and it drops you right into the color vision section of your control panel so that you can be able to access it. So here we are with all of the different kinds of things that you have set up for that. Again, we had volume and mute. And this is an interesting one where they asked us to do volume, and so we said, you want to click there, and then click there, and then click there to make it louder? And they said, oh, that's fantastic, thank you. And I said, well, instead of clicking here, 1 inch to your right, you click right there, and there's a volume control. And what did you do? People aren't aware of that. So, okay, that makes sense for people who aren't computer users. I did this at ATIA, the AT Association, Industry Association. A third of the people in the room leaned forward. What did he click on? I did this in the information science class at the University of Maryland. A third of the class leans forward. What did he click on? Okay. We take some of these things for granted. I wouldn't be surprised if there's somebody at Microsoft here someplace who would say, oh, you can click on that down there? No, but say, yeah, but I want to mute it. And then you'd say, oh, well, all you have to do is to click on this thing over here. And they would go, well, how am I supposed to know that? And you just say, well, I guess you say, gee, it would be nice if you could mute. Let me start clicking around on things. One of the things we found is that people with lower technology skills and knowledge don't just click around. As a matter of fact, we had them, they're afraid to click around. We had one who was sitting there and they're leaning over and staring at the screen, okay? And they're 6 inches from the screen. And so we showed them, you could do this, and then you can do this, and you can make it larger. And they, oh, that's incredible. Thank you so much. We come back, and then a few minutes later they come back. Oh, thanks again. This is so much faster. Next day we come in, they're squinting at the screen again. So you go over and you say, why didn't you use the thing? Well, I was afraid I would break the computer. So in a job center, you say, okay, we expect that. At the community college, at the university, we also hear people saying, I'm afraid I'm going to mess up the computer. As a matter of fact, if you go to the website, you'll see one of the people who were there when we were doing interviews said, am I going to mess this thing up? They don't just go clicking around on things because they're afraid they'll mess things up. And in the job center, they're scared to death because they're trying to, they depend on this place to get a job. They mess up their computers. What are they going to do to me, right? They don't realize we mess up our computers all the time, but that's a different animal. So things have got to be obvious. When we pop this up, people say, gee, why don't you replace all those words with icons? That would look a lot nicer. And the answer is yes, and nobody would know what the icons did. As a matter of fact, one of our people was talking about them, so I asked them to make little icons for what they think the icons should be, and they gave me them, and I said, okay, now which icons go to which one? And they go, oh, let me see, that one must be, and they actually had to try and match back. Even if they picked them out, they couldn't figure out which ones went back. And as I said, you can try this on your own icon sets and your own teams and take the words away. Now, we have an option where you can stick an icon up in the corner of these if you want to, but we actually want to have the room so that it's large enough for people to be able to read. Another thing we found was we went into the libraries and we said, what is it that the people have the most trouble with? And they said, well, they show up and they have a flash drive and they stick it in the side of their computer. And then they go around looking for a librarian because they say, I've got my resume on this thing. How do I find it? And they don't know. Well, and again, you'd say, well, that's easy. All you have to know is to type Windows Explorer. Why would they know that? What do they even know what that thing's called? Most people who use it don't even know what it's called. If you've locked this onto the tray, which isn't always there, they can click there. And then you have to say, well, then you have to click on this PC. And they click on this PC. And so they got a flash drive, and it says Tom's Trucking on it. And they look up here, and there's nothing that says Tom's Trucking. There's just all these pictures that all look like the same. And then there's this one thing that they heard about a USB. Maybe that looks like a toaster. So that can't be it. So they have no idea what they're doing. And of course, so one of the things they asked for, and so we provided, was an open eject. So you click, and it will automatically open up any USBs plugged into the computer, and there it is. There's their resume, and they can launch it and be able to use it. Same thing. My OneDrive. Okay, so it's great, fantastic tool. OneDrive, Google Drive. At the community college, they use Google Drive, and the people can't figure, what do I do? Well, you open up a browser. I'm opening a browser to get to my drive where my files are. Yeah. And then you have to type, drive.google.com. Well, that's code stuff, all right? And for OneDrive in Office, I think you actually do different things. So you can make it so that they just click on the stuff, and it automatically opens them up right to where they need to be. Okay? And so now you put it within reach of where they need to be. So these are just some of the different kinds of things. Again, we have adjust the mouse, and we have the ability, and here's one where what we did is we provided a number of things that were very common. The ability to use right or left button for left-handed people. The ability to make it easier double click for people who they can't go fast enough. A larger mouse pointer. And we'll come back to that one. The ability to make this thing so it doesn't fly around the screen on them, or it goes faster so they don't have to go, to try to get someplace to get to it. And then we also have more adjustments. And so you click here, and here we describe all of the other features. First of all, we always say that these are the commonly items provided by Windows. So it says these are Windows features, and then it says, but there's many more. And then here are all the different places that you can go to find different things to adjust your mouse. They're actually scattered around in different places. This one, if I come here, here's my left button and things like this. It says initial mouse button, so I click on this, and then I'm over here. And if I'm trying to then make into a larger pointer, I then have to go to pointer options, but it's not really there. It's under pointers. And then here you have to know that you're supposed to click on this thing called a scheme. And then you come back down, and then you have to realize that what you really want to do is to do a scheme to get there. Now, you actually have a friendlier version, and so we also provide access to that, so that if you come here, it says cursor and pointer size, color, and touch feedback. So if I click that, I get this. And I haven't quite figured out why this isn't where you go, but again, we find the different places that would be easy. Now, this is something that people can use. Could they ever find their way to this? And the answer is, I couldn't even find my way to this, so I was just using that link. Coming home and then trying to figure out, what category things are in, and then you go to those, and then you end up having to, look in the next one. And I think the mice, this says pointers and mice, which is under devices, so that's not where I would think of looking for a mouse pointer. The thing on the screen is not going to be a device. But printer, scanner, but I click on mouse, but then it's not here. And if I click there, I don't get it. So actually it's someplace, but I don't know where it is.
So I'm curious, in your experience, people don't use the search box? Like on that interface that you just had up, where
no.
you could search?
They don't. First of all, we find very few people that ever go into the control panels. Secondly, when they do, the people I search, I'm the first one. It's like, men don't ask directions, and I always go in, I always search. But most people don't even think to search, and they don't expect to find it, and they don't know what to search for. So they type mouse, and where are they going to end up? Well, they're going to end up on the wrong one, because they really want to have pointer size, which is not under mouse in this particular case. But some of those things we can work out. That's just rearranging, that's debugging. But what you can't do is you can't get them to go into the control panel in the first place. But one of the things that we want to get them into the control panel. So can we first get them used to using controls, and then wanting more, and then saying, here's where you go, and then showing them how to find it, and then you just sort of, it's like an easier on-ramp. All of us were much more exploratory and adventuresome and not afraid to dive in. But again, for example, and then I'll come back to you in a sec. We're at the AJC, and we come in, and there's this guy standing behind somebody who's sitting at a computer. There's 24 computers all lined up, all in identical cubicles, identical computers, and he's standing behind this person. 20 minutes, finally gives up and leaves. Comes back later in the day, and the computer's open, sits down, and he's using it. So you go up and ask him. It's like, I noticed you standing before, and why didn't you use one of the other computers? And he says, oh, this is the one I used yesterday. I said, well, why don't you use one of the other computers? He says, well, I don't know if I can use those, but I was able to use this one. Okay, so that's the level that we're talking about. And as I said before, with the person who was leaning over and squinting, and then it worked, and they were afraid to do anything that isn't what they did before. The mistake the previous day was to actually do it and show it to them. It should have made sure that we stuck around and had them do it 3 or 4 times so that they realized that they could do it. But again, can we, that's what we're learning, is that people are really down dealing with these things on the superstitious level. We're even finding people that we think are all computer literate because they're using their phones. Ask them to do something other besides the 4 or 5 things they do every day, and many of them They just know how to do a few things. And we need to recognize that because we need to get them beyond that. So part of the purpose of this is to get people started and to make it so that they are able to get used to it. We had one person who came in and they were sitting like 2 feet from the computer, and they sat there and said, "I don't know why I volunteered to come in and do this. I can't use computers. I'm not going to be able to do this. I shouldn't have done this. It was really a mistake." And, it was going on and on and on like this. So in that case, instead of these, we were using little NFC cards, and so we had one that said larger and high contrast. You put it on and it changed to larger and high contrast. Then we had another one that you put on and it said, different language or something. And you just, you put them on, then we had him put a couple on. And then the researcher got called away to go in the other room for a few minutes. They came back, and here was the person on there on the computer using it and browsing the internet. And it was like, what'd you do with the guy who was here a minute ago who, we couldn't get to pull his chair up to the computer? And I kind of look at it, in talking to him, it's sort of like you coming down a path and you see a pit bull standing in the middle of the path in front of you. What do? Go over and pet it? If you own one, maybe. If you don't, you stare at it and you look at it. But if somebody comes up and says, tell it to sit, and you say, sit, and it sits. And then you say, tell it to roll over, and it rolls over. All of a sudden, sure, you walk up and pet it because you feel like you're not afraid of it. You're in control. Well, because he had the ability to make this do some things at his command, suddenly it broke the fear factor. So maybe if we can figure out how to get people over that so we can get them into things, they can get them into the control panel, we can get them into making changes, into the computer adjusting to them instead of them feel like they're at the mercy of the computer. Yes, you had a question?
Have you seen any evidence that people who use your tool slowly either feel less anxious about using Windows or slowly learn where to find these settings? Or is it more like, well, you unlock the functionality that was there and it doesn't really matter to them how they can find it again as long as your tool provides that? Like, where do you see any sort of learning?
We're just, it's just opening up. In the AJCs, what we found is that the superstitious level is really very, very high. And so unless you actually are there enough, if you just put it there and walk away, if you build it, they will come, doesn't work because they're just so afraid to do it, even if they know it's there. You put it within reach and they won't reach out because they don't want to break anything. We're just now putting it in on the community college en masse, and we're putting it at the University of Maryland, so we have more data about that. But yes, what we're getting in feedback and from them and talking to them, what we want to do now is to see what happens in practice over time, is that it does both. Once they figure out, first of all, they discover that the computer can do these things, and that's a big leap for them. Then the second one is that they realize that they can do it. And again, the easier we can make it, the better. So what I just did is I keyed in with what we think may be a very, very simple one. So the quick strip is entirely customizable, so you can make it up be whatever you want. So here's one that might be for an older person, okay? And this is a person who just plain can't use Windows. They can't figure out where they are. Interestingly, if you say they're in mail and then they want to go look at pictures, and then you say, oh, well, you just quit this program and then launch the other program, and they say, what's a program? Think about it. How would you describe what a program is to an older person? And if you can't say what it is, how do you tell them that they need to change programs to do different things? Okay? And I'm stopped, and I've been trying to think about it for a long time, and I can't think how to do it. But you can make it so that you have a strip that has just the things they need on it. So it's got screen zoom, it's got screen snip, the USB, and then my pictures and my email. When they click my email, they get their email. Okay? And you can make this, mine hides again, but you can have it so the bar never closes. Okay? So that it's always open. So then when they want to get their pictures, they can click and they get their pictures. All right? And then when they see something and they go, oh, I want to capture that one. So, they come down and their screen snip is there, so they can go screen snip. And they grab the picture of grandma with the baby. And they go to My Mail. And it says New Mail. That's a good one. It's a good name on this one instead of Compose or something like that, which means nothing to somebody. And then they can paste something in here, and now they can send a picture of grandma and the child off. Something that would be completely outside of their reach, but you just pick out the things that they're looking for. But they don't have to then worry about programs and how to get from one. When they want mail, they go there. They go pictures, they go pictures. And the fact that one of them is a program here and one of them is on the web is all transparent to them. They don't need to be able to know those kinds of things. Okay? So these are kind of some of the things we can do. Can we make it so that we have tiny steps? Can we make it so that we have contained environments? They get used to it. And then she goes, okay, but now how do I browse the web? So then you add one more. And you get them leaning forward. But you throw too much of them all at the same time, and they bounce off, and then they never want to talk to you again. So the Somorphic can, first of all, it can expose hidden features that are hidden in devices. You can bring them forward. There's another More button over here that you can use, and it brings up another array of buttons, and you can drag the ones down that you want to have on your tray so that you can have a simple set here, but you can have a larger number of things to set from. But you can make it so that people can discover that there is something for colorblindness, that there is something for left and right-handed people, that you can change the mouse so that if you're having trouble using it. We can then make commonly used features or even programs be faster to get to or always shown, as we just saw in the example. We can also allow a person's settings to follow them across devices, okay? So as I move from one device to another, you saw that. But very importantly, we can also have their assistive technologies follow them around. Some of the kids we're working with don't have any computers at home. And, for those of us who have several at home, it's sort of like a different reality. But how do the kids do homework, okay? And if they need AT, how do they do homework? They can go to the library, but there's no AT on the library. So what are they supposed to do? They go over to grandma's house. She's got a computer, but does she have their AT on the computer? They go to their tutor, but the tutor can't work with them because he doesn't have the AT on the computer. You can also change between setups so that you can actually have on here, on the side here, we have My Save Settings. You can have a whole bunch of different settings there. In a household, you could have them be for different people, but a single person can have them for different ones. So some people's performance changes over the course of a day. So by the end of the day, they can't see as well, they can't move as well. They can change the profile and it'll change all the settings. For people who can't focus, they can say, set it to their study, and it shuts down all of their stuff, turns off the notifications in all their different places, and lets them just work on this. And then an hour later, or a half hour later, whenever they give up, they can click, and one click, it all comes back. If they got to churn all that stuff off one at a time, they'll never do it. You can even make it so that you turn them off and it'll automatically turn back on after a period of time. Yes?
Number 4 about the AT going on any computer. So I understand how that works if it's AT that's integrated with like Windows already, right? Like just turning narrator on or off. Well, so let's say I use JAWS. How does that work if JAWS isn't pre-installed on other computers and if the current licensing model of JAWS requires me to pay for a computer exposure?
Morphic has installation on demand, and it runs below the security layer, so that even on a lockdown computer, Morphic can install and uninstall software as it needs to. And then we're working with Freedom Scientific, et cetera, on licensing models, so that either we don't ever install and launch it if the site, the individual, or Morphic doesn't have a site license for it. So we don't launch any software that we don't have, that there isn't a valid license in place for this person on this machine to use that software.
And do you think the user group that you're talking about that doesn't have a very sophisticated mental model of technology, just the whole model of, software licensing and what that means, is that something that this demographic would understand, or would they be super confused if they go to a new computer and plug it in and JAWS doesn't come up because of a licensing issue?
Well, first of all, one of the things we're going to be doing is that we are going to be having licenses ourselves on Morphic, so that we use the local licenses if they're there, and if they're not there, we would use our license, is the way we would typically do it. Or it'll pop up and say, you can't use this software here, you don't have a license. But normally they don't have the license in their profile to use if they don't have permission. But what we do have, where the school has permission, but they have to use it someplace else, but they can't use it someplace else because the school can't tell the other someplace else that this child should be able to do that because it can't tell anything about the child, things like that. Okay? Also, really critical is it lets you set up a computer from scratch. Okay? Think of that installation on demand. So internships are really critical things for people with disabilities. A lot of people are afraid to hire somebody with a disability. They don't know if they can do the job. For people with disabilities, it's important not only for them to get job experience, it's important for them to be able to demonstrate what they can do and that they really are good. And the people who hire them find out that they can be, the most loyal and the best and most reliable, et cetera, employees. But they have to get over that. So you get an internship, he shows up for the internship, and it's a month before they actually get the stuff installed. So when you have weeks or month delay before you can actually get the AT up and running, you're pretty much out of luck on that internship. You're going to have a lot of trouble. The Minister for Accessibility in Canada uses AT, and it took a month to get her computer set up. Okay, and she basically said, if it takes me a month to get set up, Lord help anybody else in the government, kind of thing. So, or you get a promotion, or you get a job and you show up. So with Morphic, you can have the Morphic IOD, which is the server. It's got all of the software. They can just mount it on their drives. And then they can have it so that when the person comes in, they just plug in, and literally in minutes before they get back from their first orientation lecture, that computer can be all completely set up for the individual and available for them to use. Okay? So these are all things, but these are two that only Morphic can do. They can't be done any other way. Yes?
Is Morphic cross-platform?
Yes. Well, it's on Windows now, and we're moving to the Macintosh will be in the next couple months.
Would a profile be able to go from one to another?
Yes, with the following caveats. You can't run JAWS on Mac OS. Mm-hmm. Instead, you'd be using their screen reader. So we can, when they go over there, you'd launch their screen reader. But you can do things like language and speed and things like that. But they can adjust them so that they could actually have the screen reader running at a different speed on the Mac OS than it does on Windows, because on Windows, they've been using it longer and it has a different speech synthesizer. I don't know if you know this, but the rate at which you can listen is a function of the synthesizer. And some of the synthesizers that sound the best don't speed up as well, and things like that. So, so they can do those things. And it's not just for those who we think of as a disability. We're actually disabling people with complexity. I have what I call complexity-induced disability, where people are used to be able to do things, but we introduce technology and complexity, and now they are not able to do things. And we think it's them, or they just need to spend more time learning the technology. But again, if they are not people who learn technology well, it's not like our friends who are brighter than we are, who can't use their technologies, are just plain stupid or lazy. They may be CEOs, but there's a reason why they have trouble with their technology where we don't, and it's because of this function. Before I leave this and go into the future, I want to leave you with a thought. What if the only way for you guys to get a job is if you could do differential equations and integral calculus? Okay? Now, some of you would say, yeah, okay, I can do that. But the rest of us are going, I can't. I'm an electrical engineer, so this one I pass. But what if you had to have a high artistic quotient? That unless you could be a great artist, you couldn't get a job? Or what if you had to be able to compose music in order to get a job? You had to have a high MQ, music quotient. What if we designed the whole world so that you couldn't get a job if you couldn't, do that? Well, then many of us would be at a job center feeling hopeless and everything else because somebody designed a world that needed a skill that they designed into every job, a skill that we don't have. I would be. My musical talents are negative in terms of being able to compose music or something like that. So why are we creating a world where you can't get along unless you have high TQ, or an average one, or a low one? And so we need to be doing that. We need to figure out how to design for all levels. And there's ways of doing it. Layering the complexity. And Morphic, you already do some of that in yours, but my message, I guess, is first of all, we need to do more. And Morphic is a way of doing another layer, and it's another layer that, many of the things that Morphic does are things that Microsoft can't do itself because it would take on too many liabilities around having to work with every single piece of AT and things like that. But collaboratively, this is something that we can do, and that's what we're looking to do. If we don't figure out how to do that, we're going to be excluding more people as we go forward, not just in employment, and many, many more people than we realize. Okay, so any questions about that? And then I want to go to the future. Yes?
The part that you said that you're installing software kind of underneath the security layer.
Yes.
What kind of partnerships or permissions do you need from universities or labs, or you just do it?
What we're installing is a software package that they already have control of. Okay, so if they want to, they literally can have the packages mounted on their server that they've pre-scanned and they know are all available. But by working with us, what they do is they get the latest ones. We can scan them once, working with a security firm, McAfee or Symantec or whoever, and then say, okay, this has already been pre-scanned, and it's like, oh, thank you, because trying to scan AT to make sure there's no malware. There's nothing that looks more like malware than AT, right? It wants to be able to see your keystrokes. It wants to be able to see everything that's on the screen. So what you want to do is you want to have trusted, sealed packages that, the chain of possession from the manufacturer all the way to where it is. And so then now they have this block of AT, which they know is all clean. So then installing it, that's easy. But it's always the huge delay. Half of that delay is because you're asking them to do something they haven't seen before. You're asking them to install software they don't understand. When they look at the software, they go, this software looks at keystrokes, And it's like, it's pretty nasty looking stuff if you actually look at what it needs to do in order to be AT. So that's a big part of what it is.
It does require some collaboration with the organization that you're trying to help, but once...
Oh, yeah, well, they have to bring it in. Yeah, they're bringing it in, yeah.
Okay.
And any software that comes in, even Windows when it comes in, goes through a review process and stuff to make sure, and they want to make sure it works with everything else they have and things like that too. Okay. I want to set this aside for a second now, and let's talk about next generation. Now, the stuff we're doing up to now, the morphic you saw, is a collaborative work we're doing with a lot of different places. For example, Smart Work is a project in the European, funded by the European Commission. It's a consortium over there that's trying to figure out how to make smart working environments and incorporating these kinds of capabilities into it. Morphic itself came out of work funded in the United States and in Canada, and 2 European Commission-funded projects. And so this is a collaborative international kinds of efforts. This looks, so we've been looking at today and in the near future, but if we look in the next generation, we're seeing a number of things, and we actually see some of these today. One of them is, we said before, it's no longer possible to live, learn, or participate or be employed unless you can use digital interfaces. You can't get in your house. Our power company just told everybody that you can have a lower electric bill if you use one of our digital thermostats. And so they will install them, give them to you free, install them. And so people now have thermostats that they don't know how to use. Okay? They used to have one. Older people, it used to be a twister, and now all of a sudden, what's all this? The numbers don't make sense. One called up and said, well, I don't know what's happening. It said 68, and so I wanted to make it hotter. So I pushed up to 70, but then went back to 68. So then I tried to make it go to 70 again, but now it's at 72. And well, that's okay. But then it was back to 68. So then I tried to get it back up to 7. Now it's at 70. Now it's at 80. It's getting hot in here. And what they have doing, of course, is they push the button and it moves the set up. And then when it sits there, it goes back to being a thermometer. So it drops back to 68. So then they try and hit it up twice. And of course, it's already at 70. So when they punch it twice, it's now 72. And then it's 68. And they're sort of ratcheting themselves up. And it's not making any sense to them because that's not the way things behave. Microwave ovens are a delight. Every time I come up to one, I have to do a little experiment to try and figure out, I just push the 1. That's 1 minute, right? No, it's 1 second. And it's like, how do I get 1 minute? You have to put in 100 seconds. But 100 seconds is really 1 minute, 0, et cetera. The second one, and this is really key, all of the efforts we're doing today, and all the efforts we're doing, only about 6% of the products and websites are accessible, okay? So with all of the effort we're doing, we've made this huge impact of 6%. Now, you have some products, like Windows stuff, which, massively used, but most of the individual products are not made by big corporations. They're made by a million little places, and they don't even have the ability to hire people. And you hire people, but you try and train all of your designers in how to make things accessible, and it's just impossible. So it is impossible to train all developers in the major companies on how to create interfaces for all. I'm considered to be somewhat of an expert in accessibility, and yet if somebody asks me to design somebody, I start calling my colleagues. Okay, so how many people have my colleagues available to try to call to do this? If we can't be cross-disability experts, how do we expect every single designer? So this is like a lost cause, but yet this is in critical, our current model says this is what we should be doing. And then most products come from small companies, and they don't have any people on them. And then fourth, it's actually not possible to create interfaces that are cross-disability accessible by everybody. You can't do it. If you did figure out how to put all that many bells and whistles on it, it would be so complicated nobody could figure out how to use it. But even then, I've had people who were deafblind, cerebral palsy, and had a cognitive impairment and try and think of how you're going to design something. But all of the different combinations, you can't get there. So, proposition. Instead of trying to do those 4 things, all of which we pretty much know can't be done, what if you just had to make your product generally usable? If you could make it so that half of the population could understand and use it. Okay, so everybody who's blind can be in the other half. You just do the easiest 50%. And then we create an AI robot. We'll call it an infobot that is powerful enough to be able to understand and use any interface that 50%, the 50th percentile person can use. So we design from the bottom up a robot that can understand at least this much. We design down from the top. Now, as we go forward, you can go better. And it doesn't mean that you can't also build it in flexibility and as much as you can for other people, because it's really nice. But in terms of the accessibility rules and the ability to sell to the government, the ability to actually go and say, everybody can use it, we get the infobot. And then accessibility experts, and this isn't just people in universities, this is people in the companies. Wouldn't your researchers like to, instead of trying to figure out how to create an interface for a blind person to be able to figure out how to use a visual interface, what about the question, what if nobody could see? What would an interface look like if nobody could see? And could we give an interface to somebody who has no vision that's optimized for someone who has no vision? And the other problem you have is you say, well, you can do this now and just have an API. But do you know how hard it is to have an API to all the inner workings of all of your products? It's like as soon as you create an API, you froze the inner working of your products. And your designers, your architects, they just come out and say, are you serious? We can't, you're hamstringing us. So the infobot on the back end has a stable API. On the front end, it basically just is able to take whatever interface you give it. And now it works for all of your products and all of those small business products and all of those products designed by people who have no interest or knowledge of disability. Okay? As long as half of the population, and hopefully they can figure out how to design something for that, then it would go. And then the rest of us that are looking at accessibility, instead of going around trying to beat people up to try to make things accessible, we are creating better interfaces for each of these little things. I think you have something at Microsoft called Design for One, Apply to Many, or something like that. It's one of the things where you say, well, instead of us just trying to figure out how you design for everybody, let's start taking just real live cases, figure out what they take, and then figure out what we learn from that could be generalized. So that is a lot more interesting and rewarding. If you have people who are working with ALS, you could say, okay, what are people with this stage of ALS? Because ALS, of course, is progressive, and so it's a whole bunch of different targets. What is it that's going to work for them or for other people that are in that same situation for whatever cause? And then we design something for them, and we can optimize it. So we get all of these optimizations, and then they plug into the back of the information generator. So what are the benefits? First of all, disability experts inside and outside of the company can focus on creating the best interfaces for individual disabilities. And those who are doing it, that's what they really want to be doing. They don't want to be running around yelling at people about patching things. So rather than spending their time training and trying to train everybody to be expert on everything, they let their regular designers do regular design, and they focus, and they can work on their individual ones. Training everyone is never ending, as you know. As soon as you train somebody up, somebody else comes in and takes their place. If you're lucky, there's someplace else in the company, so you don't lose it entirely. But who knows? Maybe they end up in management, and so they don't design another thing. You can never reach in depth the subset who actually develop. When you get this, you barely get awareness to those levels. You don't really get expertise. And, of course, we don't get any of the small developers. And we're also asking them to be cross-disability experts, which is impossible. And asking them to do all types, all levels, and all combinations, I can't even get my students who spend 2 years studying with me to get to that level of capability for all disabilities. The interface generators can then be developed by different groups. So example, you can have people working on blindness, people working on deafness, et cetera, so team up. Also, the interfaces stay familiar. One of the things you find for people who are older, for people with dementia, for people, is the interfaces change. When you went from Windows 7 to Windows 10, it wasn't just, it was all of us were lost for a while, okay? Well, again, high IQ, high TQ, we're lost. Guess what? The rest of the world. There are people that just when you go from one version of Windows 10 to another version of Windows 10, you change a few things around, and that's enough to shake people off who are hanging on. With this kind of an approach, the interfaces on the back can stay stable. So, and that actually frees you up on the front end, because you can have on the back end, those interfaces don't have to just be for people with disabilities. They can just for people who just want to stay the same. Okay? So you can innovate on the front end without having to worry about dragging the back end along. All products would be accessible now instead of 6%, as long as the Infobot was able to use them. And the accessibility rules, if you actually, those of you who work in it, there are hundreds of them, okay? And it goes from hundreds of them to basically one. You need to work with the Infobot. And every year the Infobot gets smarter, so every year it gets better. I mean, already, as an example, we have a rule that says if you have an image of text, that you need to put alt text behind it. And yet, OCR is like everywhere, and there's no reason that the screen readers don't have, and companies, Microsoft could say, oh, yeah, we'll put a little OCR utility in our operating system if that means we don't have to ever do that again, because the screen readers can then just read it for themselves. Well, that's just the beginning. That's like the first step of an Infobot, if you think about it. And again, as the Infobot gains power, there's less and less that needs to be done in order to make sure that you work with it. Now, the Infobot's all digital, so there's still physical manipulations. But people have pointed out that you can actually take an Infobot and go up to the microwave and hold it up and be blind, and it would just, give you the interface, and then you say what you want to do, and it could do it. Or you could have there be, as I think Amazon just released an Alexa-compatible they've talked about it because they're already sold out of them. They haven't even gotten them shipping yet. Microwaves and things like this. So we used to have a problem that nobody wanted their devices to be controlled by somebody else's interface, and for the last decade that's been true. But the Alexa and Siri and Cortana, et cetera, are now have broken that, and so with the smart homes. But anyway, so we can create interfaces that people can understand. Now people say, well, why can't you just have everything be talking? And of course, some people can't talk, and an awful lot of people who can talk can't figure out what to say, and things like this. Yes?
Do you find that people still have a hard time trusting things like Alexa and
Yes, they do.
Google Home and
One of the things I didn't mention about the morphic, for example, is that we have all this information about what people need. We don't have information about them, but we have information about what they need. And so we've had several large corporations who all said, oh, don't worry about it, we'll fund the whole thing. And we said, okay, but we have two rules. You cannot data mine, and you cannot direct advertising, because I sell insurance or investment instruments, and please send them to everybody who's easily confused. There's too many ways that information. So we're actually, Morphic is all being set up to run out of a nonprofit. And over it, it's going to be a data ethics council that is going to be composed of 7 people nominated by 7 different organizations that are all privacy advocacy, human rights, or disability rights organizations. And so it will be overseen by a data ethics council that has all of the people that are all about only for what's going to benefit users, kind of a thing. So that's part of the trust pact that we have for what we're doing. With the Infobot, we're going to have to do the same kind of a similar thing. The Infobot itself would be open source, free, in the network kind of capability, and then so it wouldn't belong to any particular corporation, and then it would have to, in that way we can also keep it locked down and private because it would have so much information otherwise. But that's a really excellent point. I should make that as one of our things.
Part, since everything's getting hacked all the time, I'm assuming part of your, I'm hoping as part of your advisory board is going to be someone who's an expert in security and can make sure, because like as a
yes, we have a separate whole security thing, but we also have on the ethics, we want a data miner, sort of a black hat, because when everybody else thinks with all the best intentions that this is perfectly safe to release this information, you want somebody in the room to go, go ahead, give me a sample of it, and I'll come back tomorrow with the names attached to all of these things.
Because I wouldn't be surprised if at some point morphic is going to be targeted specifically for, oh, this is a thing that has special permissions to install software for enterprises. Oh, let's target
Oh, well, that's easier to control because remember this is all being done within the corporation, so that they can the most they could do is break in and install a screen reader or something, but they can't actually get any information back out. Yeah, so we have several of our team that every time we mention anything, they're trying to poke holes and reward them. Anytime anybody can poke a hole in what we're doing, they get lots of praise. No frowns, lots of smiles. Hey, you caught one before somebody else did. Yep. We don't yet have the ability to do this, but actually it's coming faster, and you guys are more aware of that than we are, how fast the learning is coming along. It would require a new contract with industry on accessibility, because right now you have all these accessibility rules. And if you're going to flip over and do this and contribute to this, then you need to be relieved of that. And but that's where programs and things like what we're doing and the disability community can come along, because they know that there's only a fraction. If we can show them that this is a better path, then we can do that. And then the scope and types of people we can address are limited only by our inventiveness and not by our constraints in training everybody. So the grand challenge is to create an AI bot that's powerful enough to create the individual user interface generators, and then to create a new accessibility contract between industry and society. If we come back and look at these things, is this ambitious? Yes. But it's actually the only way. If we need to be able to reach everyone with every combination of disability, and we do, we can't teach everybody how to do that. We can't even do it with 2 years of having them locked up at the university. You certainly can't do it in your places. And our current approach is, even when we're doing all that we're doing, we're just barely scratching the surface. And again, you couldn't create a product that had a built-in interface that everybody could use. It's just not practical. So some approach like this, I think, is not only our best bet, I think it's our basically only path to getting above this kind of a performance. And we need to. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
So what can Microsoft or all of us, you of us who are here working on our projects, can do to help?
Well, there's several things. One of the things that we are doing is we're actually asking, in rolling this thing out, there's two parts to it. There is the maintaining the sort of the core infrastructure and all of the work to make sure all the AT works. And then there's the cost for each additional person that sort of signs on. it's like if I said, how much did it cost how much would a copy of Windows cost if you were going to sell it to 100 people? And, it'd be like, I don't know, $100 million each or something like that. But when you sell it to billions, then the cost comes down. So we're in a situation where we need to figure out how to do the base cost. So one of the things that we're going to be doing, and it's not for you, this is for other people at other level, is to ask Microsoft to contribute some funding with other AT companies and stuff to fund basically the base operation, and that's so just under $2 million. So it would, if Microsoft could put in 500, we get 500 and 500 and 300 and 200 and whatever. So that's one thing that Microsoft can do. And as we pointed out, just from what we've seen so far, that's much less than Microsoft is spending on inclusion right now, and having Morphic out there is going to double, triple, sextuple the number of people who actually use the stuff that you have. So it's actually very cost effective in terms of that. We have things like when we're trying to tie into Windows, we're trying to find the best people who do the language pack installation so we can tie that in, make sure that really works integrally. So there's a number of places where people who are working with the innards of Windows and stuff and Office can help us to figure out how to sort of problem solve certain things. But there's a whole bunch of you who are just looking at these issues, and we'd love to have your head in this game, because we've shared some things with you, and it's also a great way for you to sort of learn. It's hard to get. The hardest thing is getting information from those that are afraid of technology, because they won't come anywhere near you. Okay, if even when we're doing a study, we go to a nursing home and we want to try and work with some elders. Okay, the only elders who will come and talk to you are the adventuresome elders. The people who are afraid of technology, they don't want to come near you. They already feel stupid, or they feel like that this stuff is just all confusing and it's completely helpless, and they're helpless and they're hopeless, and all they need to do is to have you come and prove it to them that they're even more hopeless and helpless than they thought they were. So that's some of the stuff that we are getting back. We're working with individuals with dementia and things like this to try and see what works. Fresh eyes and stuff. But you also are working on this. And so I've never done any of these presentations or talked with people where I didn't go away with a whole bunch of stuff that I learned at the same time. So it's a mutual. So one of the most powerful things you can do is to look at this. And again, poke holes. Just say, oh, this is really nice, but, why don't you have icons? Well, we talked about that. But then somebody will say, yeah, but what if you use icons here? And we'll go, oh, okay. So, yeah, okay, using them in that way, that would be helpful. For example, one of the places we do them is on my saved settings here. When you have your different setting sets, we let you attach icons to them, so that because you're doing an icon for your savings, and that just makes it easier for you to do it or for people to remember. So there's places for them. So just every time we say, well, this isn't a good idea, it's not a good idea in this particular place. But challenging us, suggesting things. Some of the improvements you see here is because a while ago I came here and presented to the design team, and they said, nice concept, needs design. So they probably look at it again and say, well, it still needs design, because we're going for function and obviousness rather than what looks like the coolest. Some of what I've seen is that the design, part of design seems to be, can you make it so that all the interface disappears? And yeah, that makes for a nice, clean, sleek interface, but it's impossible for people who are older, or even the little plus sign. People go, how do I add a user? And you hit the plus sign. They go, That's for math. Why, you know, and you say, well, no, the plus sign, whatever you see it, that means you can add something. And it's like, but I'm not trying to add, I want to, you know, it's hiding the interface in plain sight. Yes, and then, go ahead, you first.
Okay. As far as the interface, would it be the exact same for like Windows, Mac, and other platforms? Or
Well, like I said, if this one, for example, email would be the same.
as far as sorry, like appearance. A
Oh,
lot of times when people design something for like
oh
that
no,
versus
no.
Windows, they change it, and that
This is what it looks like on the Mac.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we do have something where this looks really great with this Windows. Okay, but will this, you know, blue and stuff work great on a desert scene or on a, you know, something else? So you know, those are things that we need to look at going forward. But we're trying to have something that's pretty neutral and pretty simple and pretty basic, and it doesn't keep changing. So that in the world of everything changing, something is you know, it's there. It's always basically the same, and this is the colors, and it did derive from your Windows, but it also comes from your design. Yeah.
Do just one more question.
One more question. And we'll get
Sure. So you know, thinking how do we go from morphic to the infobot? It's
Yeah.
a ways to go. So
Well, they're two different.
right,
They're two different paths, but yes, right.
I understand. So sort of, I'm sure there are a lot of steps to get to infobot.
Right.
What would be like the first one or two, and maybe if you have any sequence of steps? Because I'm an engineer, I like to sort of
Yeah.
think about it.
So you guys are already doing some of it. I would start off. I actually would like to get NSF to put $100 million into a grand challenge to do this, simply because it would advance so many parts of science. It would advance machine vision. It would advance natural language. It would advance sort of the idea, because the API on the back of this is going to have to be like a universal interface API, and that's not easy to do today. But what about in the future when we have direct brain interfaces? What about in the future where one of the things can be emotions, feelings, and so that I actually, when I walk into the feeling, I can look at each one of you, and I not only get information and stuff and things like this, but I also get, you know, like intuitions or what. I have no idea all of the things that once you start coupling into the brain, we're going to be doing. So what's the API for that? So one whole team that's just looking at the theoretical aspect. This is a great one for Microsoft research. What is the theoretical omnibus API for interface to information that's independent of any modality? Okay, so that you can then create all the different modalities. Another one is machine vision. So we have a whole bunch of, can I look at a screen? And some of these things we can put together already. And if we created a really good, just screen scraping right now, if you could screen scrape and be able to pull stuff off, you know, how many Microsoft engineers are sitting there trying to figure out how to add all the alt text and stuff like this? Well, if you can screen scrape and give it to an infobot, you could also screen scrape for a tool that would fill in a lot of the stuff. And it's not all of it, but you can take away all the drudgery and then make it so that the people who are working on it are actually doing that. And then whatever they're doing, they can be getting insights into the next layer of information that needs to be somehow gleaned from our interfaces. All your people that are working on the next generation, you're doing stuff with virtual reality and augmented reality. All of those things are really very interesting. You have people that are working on games and trying to make them accessible. And right now it's by trying to plug in. And we used to naively think that, well, if the computer generates the scenery, then it knows that that's a chair and it knows what everything is, and so it can just say it. And the answer is, oh no, not anymore. Computers can generate chairs and have no idea what they're generating. They're just given a model and say, here's a thing. And we're going to have a bunch of these in the room, and they tip over like this, and now you can have a complete behavior going on, and it has no idea that those things are actually for sitting in or that they're called a chair. But You also are scanning the internet and taking all these pictures, and you have the automatic image description work that you guys are doing. And so you're already doing pieces of it. And so trying to plug it out. And then a big one is what you just said, and that is getting people together and say, okay, what's the roadmap? So we're doing little bits in here and there. But that's like, trying to build a car because there's some people that are making a bunch of the parts. To make a car, you actually have to have a plan to make all of the parts and make them work together. So, yep. Excellent. Well, thank you very much.